This is the second one, and I heard from the beginning is that you want strategies. Your leaders, you want to fight hunger, and you want strategies. So my goal of this presentation is that you come away with some ideas on collaboration. And I think it's really important that if we're going to fight hunger, we have to look at it from a collaborative aspect. And we're going to go through a couple ideas of what that means. When we look at collaboration, we could look at it from the lens that you're collaborating with yourself. And that was really that first one, because we did talk about internal and hidden biases that we probably aren't aware that we have, especially with food access. So it's really, how can I empower myself to see where I'm wrong so I can be right? And that would be the first level of collaboration. The next collaboration is really you collaborating with the person who needs the food. And what does that look like? What is the conversation that you're having with the person? And we're going to go into some communication strategies today, but we did touch a little bit on that in the first webinar. The second one will be maybe how you collaborate within your own community college. So that could be between departments. That could be your food service operation. It's really, does your right hand know what the left hand's doing? How do you empower each other to come together and create policies, system, a cultural shift that will help improve, or I should say, get rid of, to start breaking down those barriers to food access. And then the fourth one is really that community collaboration, outreach collaboration with other organizations, whether that's your Feeding America Food Bank, Independent Food Bank, grassroots efforts in your local community. Any of that would count. So as we go through this, I want you to have in that mindset, write down, oh, wow, that would be a really great collaboration. And then the next webinar is it's really you coming to me and asking questions, but I would like to invite you, if you have someone that you want to collaborate with, maybe it's a student who can be a leader who might also be food insecure. I don't think you have to screen for food insecurity. We'll talk about that in a minute, because we know at a community college level, it's a very high rate of food insecurity. But how do you get your students to be leaders? How can you, maybe there's a department chair, maybe there's a student club, that leader you could bring to the meeting. Maybe it is someone in the community, your Feeding America Food Bank liaison, or your independent food bank, or a food rescue organization. I want you to bring them so you can ask questions that are very strategic to what you want to do. And that's how I see the third one going. So what you glean from this, what you take from this, is super important for the next step. So again, let's get into food dignity strategies to improve nutrient security. Also, I would love for you, if you have any questions, if you have any comments, because we're going to go through a lot, high level overview of a bunch of different strategies. We will be having a document that will come out of this. I wanted to get your feedback, see what your thoughts are, what you liked, what did you want more information. The document is 99% done. It's going to be a roadmap for you that's full of a lot of strategies. You will be getting that. But as we go through this, if something strikes you, please write it, ask in the chat. I don't mind stopping and discussing it right then and there, especially when it's a hot topic. All right, so today we already reviewed last webinar, discussed strategies. That's what we're going to do, and we're setting the stage for the next webinar. So just in case you didn't see it, food dignity, if you didn't see the first webinar, the food dignity really has 3 pillars. I'm not going to go into detail of all of them, but it does recap a little bit what you saw last. Respect life experiences. It's really important that we understand the lens that we come from, based off of our own life experience, and understand that everyone around us, even the people that you collaborate or the people you're serving or working with, they have different life experiences. And so bringing people in and learning about that only enriches your program and makes it stronger. Understanding barriers, and many times we think of the big level barriers, transportation, location of grocery stores, all those things. But we need to also pay attention to those small barriers. So in that webinar, we talked about a bridge. Is your bridge up? Is it down? And what does that mean? Because if your bridge is down, that means you have flow, you're improving food access, people can access it. And if you remember the webinar, you understand what I'm talking about. And then the third one is leading with strengths. How can we empower the people around us? So I call this empowered collaboration. I think many times we think of we're collaborating with people because we're working with them. And that fits, but I want us to dive deeper in how do we, so many times, let me back up. Many times when we work with other organizations, sometimes we fear to work with someone because they might take the credit, they might get the award, they might get all the participation, they might get all the funding. And so if we're truly ever going to end hunger or any social injustice, we have to have empowered collaboration. So when I'm working with another nonprofit, I will share my resources and I will say, you know what, for the greater good and the bigger picture, we need to share our resources, come together and not have those fears. And actually, at the end of the day, if you're a grant writer and you're listening, funders love that. I've received more money because of that attitude and working with collaborating in that mindset. We're going to touch on that. And then you'll also remember the biggest questions, what's my lesson today? So again, I like to just remind people, this is how I come today. What can you teach me? I'm not here just to talk. I'm here to learn too. And so anytime we can go into any meeting, any conversation with what do I need to know to do better, we're all going to do better. All right. These are the barriers. Just wanted to put that up there. There's so many barriers. If we think about this, it's almost overwhelming. How are we ever going to end hunger? But understanding them, and I think more importantly, what you need to understand here is that when we can elevate the people around us, they are the people that are the experts in their life. And I do believe after almost 14 years now with direct service, meaning I've been handing and giving out food, not sitting behind a desk and talking to people, solutions live in the hearts, the minds, and the souls of the people that we're serving and the people that we're working with. And I think if we can understand what their barriers are, it's not always going to be what research says. There's going to be barriers that we've never even considered. One I talk about a lot, which I don't think I even listed in that first webinar, which I don't think you're going to have this barrier too often, but I could be wrong. You could have an elderly population or maybe even a younger population with arthritis, but think about arthritis and trying to cut up fresh fruits and vegetables. That would be really hard to do. That's a barrier that we might not always consider. So when we really find out what's not working, but also what the successes are for the people that we're serving, we can come to a better solution. The number one thing you can do is have focus groups and surveys. I can't say this enough. I believe I mentioned this on the last one, but you can download this resource. It is a question bank. So anytime we are working with students, interns, I was working with 2 today. We always talk about this document and okay, pick 3 questions. We need to survey and it becomes their project. So these are college students and whether they're doing service learning, they have an internship, we are able to use this document for them to get information from the people that we're working with so we could do better. And I think the more we can have focus groups and do these surveys and get the input of the people that we're serving, that's where you're going to see the success. So I just want to bring you back to that document. All right, first thing, strategy is, can you provide sensitivity training? And I think this is probably one of the most important things that you can do, whether you are doing it as part of curriculum or you're doing it part of just training in general. This is, I would say, it's definitely free. So what happens is we've had a lot of professors reach out wanting to be able to teach food insecurity in the classroom, and there's not a lot of resources. So we were able to get this resource. It's peer reviewed. We did ask what people needed. So it's small modules, maybe like when I say small, short videos, 5 to 10 minutes with engaging conversation starters, participatory learning activities. So it's not a typical webinar or series. This is free. So you could do sensitivity. This is super easy to do. Right now we are having professors use it as a teaching tool, but you can use it to train your staff, your leadership at your university when you are trying to create some type of system policy change around food access. Sensitivity training, is probably one of the most important things you can do because there's a lot of barriers around judgment. And I personally believe that once you get, we all play a role. We all have a piece of the puzzle that creates either shame. We either empower people or we disempower people. And so where do you fit in this piece of puzzle? And doing that sensitivity training will definitely work with you. All right, so this is my favorite thing, strategies on how to get students involved. Really look at this from a workforce development. I always say that food access and food insecurity, it can be adapted to any subject, any profession, any industry, scope of practice, you name it. And these are actually majors that I have worked with either at the community college level or at the university level. Engineering is not on here. I did work with an engineering student once. So you can actually work, obviously, I think the most obvious is healthcare, food as medicine. Food as medicine, that is the popular sexy word right now. Dietitians have actually been doing food as medicine for years. I believe that it's just repackaged as something different. But when we talk about food access and how it impacts health, any of your healthcare professions can get involved. If you have like medical technology, that how awesome would that be to have an internship right there on site, or service learning, or even a paid position through any type of funding that you might have, where they're getting experience taking blood pressures and being involved in that process and connecting health to nutrition. I worked with Geisinger Medical School. They came to me because they wanted their students to volunteer. And I said to them, actually, I would rather them work on site at your school and do a focus group, do surveys. We worked with them on doing that, our nonprofit. The students put out all the information, got information. They set up free produce stands. So they basically learned how to do food as medicine as future doctors, and they helped their cohort, they helped their peers have access to a more equitable diet when they were struggling themselves. Immediately, the school wanted to go outside and help a food pantry. And I told them if they're going to learn anything, the students need to know how to be able to take care of themselves first. And that's a way of learning. And so I think there's a lot of opportunity being missed there. Culinary, great opportunity here where the students can, and this is another popular trendy thing happening, is upcycling food. So upcycling food is where there's a food recovery program. They're bringing food that would have otherwise gone to landfill, perfectly edible food, or maybe you're getting end of life produce from your Feeding America or independent food banks. They can take that, turn it into a meal, and especially if it's an industrial kitchen. So now they're taking food, free food, turning it into meal, getting culinary experience, and then freezing it. And you can have your students take home meals, or you can have them heated up for lunch, right? So there's a lot of fun things that you can do with culinary. Human resources, they can work on your volunteer packet. So all your policies, your procedures. We talked about med tech, business administration. I work with business students all the time. They help. I'm horrible with detail, right? So they're able to do all of the financial and keep track of that information. Warehouse management. I don't know if you have any of this. I've worked with career and technology. This is institutes they're really high school level students, but you might have this. They can come and set up work. They can actually go out and work at warehouses that are food pantries or food banks. But what can they do with you on site in setting up the area? Writing in English, they can do real world writing. So that could be like your social media, that could be your press releases. You can have grant writers. So there's so many things that you can do with that. Restaurant management, again, that might go up into that culinary, but again, production records, anything that they're doing with that culinary. So I think those two really go together. And then arts, you're going to see gorgeous artwork throughout my presentation that's done by a student who actually just graduated from Syracuse University. So she listens to the podcast and she applies her art to what we do, and it actually enhances learning. And so there's many, many things that you can do within your major. So how do you create that from a collaboration? Is there a department that you want to collaborate with? Do you want to create workforce development? And hint, hint, we're going to be talking about this in grant writing. So workforce development is another hot topic for grant writing that you can apply to food insecurity. So now you're win-win on two different things. And when you apply for workforce development, you're most likely not competing with your local food banking funding. And that's also key for your success. If you have any questions, just please pop it in and let me know. Okay, communication strategy. I think this is a big one. I think words matter. And earlier you heard me say, I don't think we need to screen for food insecurity. And you might have had a reaction to that. You could have agreed with me, or you could have been like, well, how do we track? For me, it's really important when we're collaborating with outside, we're getting away from the food pantry model, and we actually work with nonprofits who already serve a high risk population for food insecurity, and we don't screen. We actually say, I always say, why do we have to say we're fighting hunger? Why can't we just say we're a community, we all need food, there's excess food, we're recovering food. Anytime you work with a food bank as a collaboration, there's a lot of food recovery on the backside of that. So you can really say you're working in food recovery. So why do we have to always say we're fighting hunger? Like, you're hungry, so here's our food pantry and come get the food, and then fill out paperwork. Now, if you do work partnership with certain food banks, you might have to do paperwork that they need you to do. And we can talk about that. You can ask questions. But instead of talking about food insecurity or hungry, can we just talk about the stress of food? We all experience stress with food. I can't tell you how many times I hear about the inflation of grocery store prices. And then on top of paying tuition and books and maybe working multiple jobs, there's a lot of stress. So can we just call it food stress, right? So what can we say that will bring people in versus automatically create maybe some embarrassment or shame? When we talk about naming, do we call it a food pantry? Or here's two I love. One's called the Root Cellar for New Roots. So they just call it the Root Cellar. Pitchfork, I think that's Arizona State. I interviewed them on the podcast, and I believe theirs is called the Pitchfork. You can get your students, and this is what we did at Geisinger Medical School, and I honestly cannot remember the name that they came up with, but we had them do a competition. They put it out there. First, they did surveys. We did it from a sustainability, we're rescuing food, what would you do with that food? And they brought up the word hunger. We never even had to say hunger. We talked about it from an environmental sustainability standpoint, saving Mother Earth, right? And so if we can save Mother Earth and we can bring this food and we're all going to share it, what should we name? What should we name it? And have a competition and get people involved. You can even have the arts people do graphic design, do some logos for you, have competition with that. So you could get really creative. And I think another thing, at least if you have a food pantry, one strategy, make it I remember when I was a professor, I adjunct at 3 different universities, and there were certain things we had to have on our syllabus, right? That the university mandated. Can you mandate on your syllabus that you have a list of where the food is and the access and the times that it's available? Any questions? All right. So, Geisinger Fresh Food Pharmacy. Woohoo. Crystal, we did a 2-year pilot, Food is Medicine, with them at here locally. So they do a great work. And if anyone has any questions, I can talk to you about that. But sustainability. Many times we think sustainability is one thing, and that might be the environment. Well, that is the environment, right? So we could be looking at methane gas, CO2 emissions. We could be looking at plastic bottles. But there's 2 other pieces in sustainability. You have cultural and social. So that's going to be your diversity, equity, inclusion. I'm sure you have a department there that does this. So food equity plays a huge piece in this, but it's left out a lot of times because that cultural and social DEI, we might be concentrating on other things, but we should also talk about what is the equity of food access in that diversity, equity, inclusion? The next one is economics, right? So that is basically, can someone afford the food? And so that would be your hunger relief. When I think of cultural social, that's food dignity, food justice, environmental, that would be your food waste, food recovery. When we combine all of these, I like to call it human sustainability. We need all three of these for us to survive, for us to thrive. But many times we just focus on the environmental. And I wanted to talk about that because I think from a grant writing standpoint, this is super important to be able to understand them. And if you are writing DEI grants, how can you include money or ask for money from a food equity lens? Not just from the economic would be more of like that hunger piece of not having access because you don't have money. There's other reasons people don't have access. Okay, any questions on sustainability? And I love this graphic here. Many times I'm a dietitian, and I'm kind of fed up with people saying you need to eat a sustainable diet. When you have the ability to talk like that, that's a very privileged conversation to have. I just interviewed someone, an animal welfare rancher, veterinarian guy, and he was talking about how they're not in the beef industry for the rich and famous, and that they're in it to feed people. But when the rich and famous shame hot dogs or shame food because of certain sustainability practices, are not understanding sustainability practice, we're hurting the people who cannot afford it or might not have the access to it. So I think that this is just another beautiful reminder that sustainability, we have to understand the level of sustainability of who we're talking to, what is sustainable to them. And if you heard me talk at the other webinar, you heard me tell a story about soda, a mom putting her child to bed with soda because the carbonation and the sugar combined together gives a feeling of fullness. And you, in the community college setting, have probably a lot of single parents, and that might be a sustainable resource for them. And we need to understand that lens. And that's why we need to have focus groups. That's why we need to interview people with the utmost compassion and sensitivity, inclusion that we can. Okay, location of the root cellar. I don't want to call it a food pantry. I'm really trying to get out. I will probably call it a food pantry because I've been doing it for many years. Where is the food located? I have seen food located all the way across campus. And when I'm talking campus, I'm talking a really big ag school where it might take 30 minutes to walk across campus and you're pretty much going uphill. Am I going to walk first? So it's hidden in a way. It really is. It's very far, so it's harder to get to. And then if I'm walking that far, how much food can I really carry? So there's all these things happening. I've seen food pantries located in the VP of Student Affairs office. I think I mentioned this on the last one. I was always intimidated to even talk to my teacher, let alone go ask for food at the VP of Student Affairs office. Are all students welcome? So is it just marketed to students that are hungry or food insecure? Or can we make it inclusive? I love the one community, it was Ocean College. They had me come in and speak and do training. And the one thing that they were doing, they were having coffee hour. And they were invited, and they had special coffee. It wasn't just decaf and regular. So it was coffee that students really wanted to have. And they would have coffee hour in the morning. And then they would offer food. And they really tried to source the grab and go stuff that they could eat right then and there if they didn't have breakfast, or they can grab a quick lunch. And they could also take food home. So they had like 3 different levels of food. Actually, that's kind of like 2 different levels. But they welcomed all students, and they used the coffee hour to have people come in and get coffee. And they welcomed all students. They did keep track of who took food, but they didn't turn any students away. The other question is, do you have paperwork to qualify? Most likely, if you're working with a food bank that has government food, you will have to do a TFAP form. However, if you can find a food bank that does not work with government food, you won't have to have that. You should not have to have it. If you're working with a food bank that does have government food, maybe tell them you take the government list off. You don't want to see that. So you know that you're never getting government food and you're only getting donated food. Then have the conversation and ask them, do I have to do this form because I'm not getting government food? It's donated food from your food bank that has been donated to them, or maybe they purchased. Okay, any questions on location, paperwork, or where people, or what kind of foods or anything? Nope. Okay, grant writing. By the way, Dan, he was on our Food Dignity podcast. He's at a university, I believe, in New Jersey. He is amazing. His podcast is amazing. So I would look up and listen to that. There's a couple, and Maria Ramirez, she's another person. She does DEI at NYU. We interviewed her on DEI and food equity as it relates to food insecurity on the podcast. So I would listen. Those are the two college level podcasts. I highly recommend them. And that's the Food Dignity podcast. So let's talk about grant writing. Me personally, I'm going to share my experience with this and how I learned to do this. I'm not the favorite person of my local food bank because I would come up with really unique ideas. I was seen very fast as more as someone that they were competing with, which sounds weird, but that's just how I think the food and hunger world and probably most nonprofits, if you're seen as a threat, and we are in a small town. I should let you know that. It became very hard for me to get funding because all the funding would go to our bigger food bank, funding to fight hunger. And anytime I would talk to foundations, our local people around here, they would, United Way, anyone, they would always say, just go get food from your local food bank. And that it just wasn't working for me because when you have a food pantry or a root cellar, you're going to need money for additional funding. It's not, you might get free food from your local food bank, but there's other things that you might need to pay for. And so again, I like to say hunger can be connected to any topic because at the end of the day, people need food to thrive, right? And so it's turned into my job for anyone to challenge me, and I will prove to you how if you don't have access to food, it will hurt your industry. So if you can go into grant writing with that mentality and you look at what they want, you can spin that where food improves the outcomes that they want based off of that grant. So you can certainly apply for grants with food insecurity, but you might be you might not get it. You might get it. You might put a target on your back, or you might have a really great experience and be able to collaborate with people. So it just depends on where you are, the culture of your community, and it's going to be different everywhere. Sustainability. We already talked about that. Sustainability is huge, 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 huge. Remember the 3 levels. Workforce development. I think this is one of the biggest topics happening right now. Economic development, workforce development. So if you can create jobs or training for jobs through creating your food access point, or whatever you want to call it, you can write grants for that. Food waste, EPA, Environmental Protection Agency, has a bunch of grants out right now. And that is for infrastructure to rescue food. So you might say, you already know, I already told you, food banks, a lot of behind the scenes is food rescue there. All you have to do is apply for refrigeration. So if you need refrigeration, which you do, if you're going to have an on-site food access, you want refrigeration so you can have your dairy, you can have your meat, you can have your eggs, you can have your produce. It's not just canned items or packaged items. So you can easily write a grant for refrigeration. You can easily write a grant for a truck, a reefer truck. So that would be like a big van refrigerated, because then you can go from point A to point B to pick up food that has been rescued. You can write an EPA grant for upcycling food if you have your culinary team and a culinary department. If you have any questions on those, you can email me. This is why we're going to have that 3rd webinar where you can come with these questions. Regional agricultural, small farms. So what's happening is we have big ag. We've had big ag for a long time. in the United States. So it's going to be big farmers working with big producers, working with big box stores, working with Big Hunger. When I say Big Hunger, that's going to be your Feeding America network, right? Because they have been doing this for decades. They've monopolized the system. There's nothing wrong or bad, or maybe there is with that. But if we think about big ag, where is there space for small ag? Can we connect with our farmer down the street? I'm seeing a lot of success with that. I have been doing that now. I'm going into my 4th year. Now the state of Pennsylvania has requested a statewide proposal showing how we are positioning the small farms with small nonprofits, connecting them as a resource. Like, here's a farmer who has food, has surplus food, but we do pay a fair price to that farmer. We are not asking for them to donate. Because we want to see sustainability in keeping those farmers around. That's a really important piece to that. And then how are we connecting it with people literally a mile down the road who needs their food? And I'm not talking like farmer stands. Like, how do we really get food to the people that need it? And so if you can work in your regional agriculture, and agriculture is not just produce. So we actually just purchased 2 cows, our first 2 cows. We're looking at purchasing chickens. We do dairy, and we also do eggs. Food is medicine. This is another, I already told you, it's trendy, 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 trendy. It's a hot topic. You have pharmacists getting involved in this. You have healthcare organizations getting involved in this. You have grocery stores getting involved in this. So if you have any majors that are going to go into that industry, food is medicine fits right in there along with your food access point. And then again, diversity, equity, inclusion. And this is where it's really food empowerment, food dignity, food justice, and food equity. But I take it a step further, food empowerment / food dignity. Any questions? Okay. Oh, I see something. Hold on, I got to move my chat over. I like involving faculty and curriculum and our snack pantries. Yeah, I think it's the biggest thing because you need to really make it community led, right? So I love that. And especially for your international students, I've had sociology and nursing professors involved. Yep, their classes in food donation, food insecurity issues. Yeah. And if you want more, please if you want to bring your nutrition people or bring them to the next meeting. Ask questions because I work with that population a lot. I'm a preceptor for dietetic students for many, many years. So thank you for that comment. All right. Evaluation. So this is where you're going to stand out and you're going to be different. Many organizations in Hunger Relief count meals and count people. I can teach you how to count meals. Count meals, you take total pounds. So your total pounds served, if it's 100 pounds, and you multiply the pounds by 1.2, that gives you total meals. That's it. Pounds times 1.2 will give you total meals. If you want to do a cost value of what those total meals cost, you can go on the Feeding America Network and they will have on their meal map guide, they'll have a dollar amount for what a meal should cost in the United States. It might be around $3.34. I don't know what it is. Don't take that for face value. That is constantly being updated, and my memory is not that good. So that was a rough estimate, but you can just multiply that number by your total meals, and then that would give you an estimate amount of value that you've served. So that's your math for today. If you have questions about it, let me know. But many people, that's what they report. You want to be different. If you want to get the grants, you got to evaluate. You might have students that can evaluate for you depending on what majors you have, right? And what they're going for. Do you have public health there? How can you start measuring and think about this? Attendance. If you have this open on Friday and Friday's a low attendance day, have you increased your attendance by providing food? Are students going to come to school on Friday because they know they get food for the weekend? You can measure that. Easy. Sign-in sheets, super easy. Retention. Are students staying at your school longer? Now, this is going to be a longer term evaluation, but if you can show that you're improving retention rates, think of the funding, and think of the think of the people you would impress within your own administration. Grades. Does it impact grades? I think you would have to look at that student from a, depending on if it's 2 years, 4 years, it's probably hard to evaluate this because it's like you have the control or lack of control because the classes change. But you can go deeper, concentrate. You can ask specific questions about concentration. Do they have headaches? Are they sleepy? Do they come to class more often? I mean, you can ask these questions. Morale. Do they feel proud to be at your school? Do they feel seen, understood, valued? Do they have more of a loyalty to your university? Do they have peace of mind that they can study? Do they have peace of mind that they don't feel alienated? I think in October 2019, I would get that journal, the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics, that journal. I don't remember the name of it, of the article, but it's right in the middle. And it talks about students and how they feel towards their school around food insecurity. These are food insecure students talking about how they feel towards their school. I highly recommend that. October 2019, the Academy of Dietetics journal. And that whole journal is dedicated to food insecurity. What else? Participation. Obviously, when I say participation, yeah, you can measure, that would be your increased number of people served. But participation in this mind is if you're doing some type of activities, right? So maybe I'm going to do it from my lens. It's not your lens, but I'm going to do it. So we're at New Roots as a drug and alcohol recovery. We're doing cooking on site. Now, we are seeing an extreme amount of increase in participation, and it's because all we're doing is saying, what do you want to eat? And show us how to cook. What are your favorite family recipes? It's not, oh, come learn about Brussels sprouts today. Like, we're not going in with a set curriculum. So I know if there's any professors on here, they might be like, but when we consider people as the leaders, and they're teaching us, and we eliminate power dynamics and we're including them in the process, in the developmental process, you are going to increase participation in any program that you're doing. That's what I'm talking about, not participation of how many people are eating. You can do confidence rating of their food stress level and food access, their confidence in that by them having food. You can talk about, you can evaluate for how far are they going to get food without it versus having it on site? How far are they going to get food? If they're coming to you, do they have to take a bus two bus stops or 2 bus routes to get food? And then what I really love is we evaluate our partnerships. We track the information that we give people, the power, right? I think we all hold a level of power, and someone else is going to hold a different level of power. Are we sharing that power with each other? And when we can give our power and our knowledge and our resources away to make someone else better, what do they do with it? And you can evaluate that. And we just started doing this, and I'm really excited about it because I don't think this is something that people are evaluating, because having empowering partnerships and empowering collaborations, it's hard to come by. But if you can do it and you can show how your organization improved another organization, could you imagine? I'm anticipating a lot of funders and funding to be supporting this, because even when I talk about it to funders, they get excited. We don't have that. It's being evaluated right now. So next year we'll have more information on it. Okay, so food dignity. One of the things, this is a really important pyramid for us. At the base of everything we do, it's about empowering other people. So I'm just going to kind of go through this again. How do we empower ourselves to say, I can give people this resource and I don't have to hold on to it? How can we empower ourselves to say, I don't know everything and I can be wrong? I probably am wrong. I love to think So many times when we think that we're so right, we're mostly like really wrong, right? Um, so self-empowerment and being able to walk away from that ego is one of the most important things we can do as leaders. And then how do we center the people that we're serving? How do we give them a voice and a trusting relationship? My biggest success with this was working with an AmeriCorps Vista. I don't know if anyone here has ever worked with an AmeriCorps Vista. I highly recommend looking into it. So it's kind of like the Peace Corps in the United States. We worked with a single mom of 3. She was in recovery. She only had a high school diploma, and she started volunteering with us because she needed food. And then we had this position open up as AmeriCorps Vista. She was able to get paid, instead of volunteering, $15 an hour through another organization. It's government funded. And then she would do training with that organization to become a public health specialist. But then she would do her hours. She had to do 3,000 hours with us. So it's almost like I had free labor, but she was getting training. And at the end of the day, she came out. It was almost like a trade school. Even though it wasn't a trade school, right? But it was on the job training, but she was going through the certification. And how we empowered her when we're at New Roots Recovery, drug and alcohol recovery, if I came in, someone who's not food insecure, never been food insecure, someone who has a lot of privilege, someone who has a couple degrees, right? Are they and never been in recovery? I don't know if I said that. So when I sit down in this environment to talk to someone, would they rather talk to me or Rebecca? I always said to her, she had more clout than I do. Her trust level with people is instantaneous versus me. So it was a lot easier for her to have these conversations, and me being able to say, you know what, I might be the registered dietitian, but you're going to have the trust immediately. And all I want you to do is ask what you want to eat. So having that ability, this is empowered collaboration, right? And then all of this gets a little scary. So we have the internal reflection, whether it's the person we're trying to empower, do they really feel comfortable? Or is our body language saying something completely than our words? Or is there really trust that's being built over time? And we do this through our strategic communication, and then not just words, but our actions. And we call this social justice, leveling, inclusion. I think you've heard leveling up and leveling down. I don't like the idea of leveling up, and I don't like the idea of leveling down. I think it happens both ways, right? And so how do we level inclusion? And I think, well, I know if you can think about it from this lens, and you can think about the things that we've talked about, who do you want to partner with? Who do you want to bring to the next meeting? And how are we going to have strategic communication and build that empowering collaboration? I truly, and I say this 100 times, when we collaborate and when we join forces, that's when hunger is going to end. If we continue to stay in our siloed, when I say siloed, right? Many times organizations work without communicating. We see that internally. So one division or one department and another department might not be communicating, or we could be working one organization, not collaborating with the other organization. And so when that happens, hunger, I think, is always going to win. So we really need to have that collaboration piece. All right. So communication strategy, I think, is another really, all of this, I think, is really important. I'm repeating myself, but if I'm going to partner, so we're going to talk about, and it could be between departments. So you can think about this from that lens, but I'm going to talk about it from the lens if I'm going to communicate with an outside organization. So if say for me, and I want to communicate with my local university, which could be you, I'm not going to say we need to fight hunger. Although you're here, you want to end hunger. You would probably perk up if I said that. But if it's someone I did not know, they were not on this webinar, and it's a university that is down the street from me, and I don't know anything about their belief systems or their motivation to fight hunger, I'm really going to talk about retention rates. I'm going to talk about student success. I'm going to talk about how they can be more competitive with other universities and their students' overall happiness. And I'm going to do that by the lens that hunger or food access will impact all of that. So, what I just did was I didn't go in talking about what's important to me. I went in talking about their values, and then I bring in our outcomes that's going to help improve their values or help them meet their mission. So when I'm meeting with a pediatrician group, which could be someone you would want to collaborate with, um, I could actually see that. We work with a local pediatrician group. When I first went to them, this was probably like 10 years ago, and I did go in childhood hunger. We got to end childhood hunger. It's not that they didn't care about childhood hunger. It just wasn't, they didn't see the dollar bills around it, right? And that because they have their strategic plan. They have what they have to do to run their business. It is a business. So later, 2 years later, we do have a partner. Now we have a long-term partnership. That pediatrician group that didn't want to have anything to do with it, they now screen for food insecurity. They have VIP cards to partnering food pantries, and they do their own mobile distribution that's open to the community once a month. And they are extending and I'm calling it food pantries. They call it food pantries. They're extending their food pantries to all their other locations. But the way I got them, I talked about chronic disease, patient engagement. They will understand it more as patient compliance, right? Maybe not with this population. Transitional care is typically when you have an elderly patient that will go into a hospital. If they're released and then they have to go back within 30 days, the hospital healthcare organization doesn't get any reimbursement. So transitional care is huge, huge, huge. That's big. And you could get really creative with that. If anyone's interested in that you could get creative with that. And then obviously healthcare costs, right? And even healthcare costs, you can talk to universities, you can talk to corporations because they still pay healthcare. They have utilization rates. So they want their utilization rates to go down. Is your college or community college working with your staff? You probably have staff that is food insecure themselves. And if you watched the first webinar, you learned the stages of food insecurity. Corporations, this is someone who you probably would want to partner with, depending on who's around you. You might want to get some of their foundation money. They have them do a corporate donation, a corporate sponsor. Corporations are going to, obviously, if you're helping their employees, which you wouldn't be, but you might be because you might have students that work for that corporation. Could you see that partnership? I know we have a lot of Luzerne County Community Colleges in my county, and around them is a bunch of industrial warehouses. A lot of people that go to school there work there. Could you imagine partnering, doing some type of collaboration where that company is sponsoring your food pantry? And you can say you have all these employees and you're going to give, like, I don't know, just VIP something where they're feeding, that food pantry is supporting their employees. They're going to have better utilization rates. They'll have better brand loyalty. They'll have better employee morale, right? And think about, even if they just donated, that brand loyalty, the community in general is going to be like, oh, wow, Chewy the warehouse just donated all of this money to support that food pantry, right? So you could have some really good collaborations if you need to find out where your employees work for the most part, or where your students might have jobs. And I would have to think that most of them do. Hold on, I can't see that. Nonprofits. So this would be someone else who you would potentially want to partner with. So that could be, nonprofits are going to care a lot about funding. Is it going to be, they have very limited funding, so they want more funding. So that collaboration and coming together actually improves funding. It's a paradox, I think, or not a paradox, but it's a misconception. Nonprofits want to have an increased participation. They have that fear of competition, and there's usually a lack of collaboration. So when you're working with and then obviously if you're working with a nonprofit, you want to know their mission. That would be very specific, and you go into that mission. This is a general list of what all nonprofits might need. So very unique way of looking at how to partner. Recap again, what's important to the person that you're working with? How do you find out their values, what they want, and then connect what you do or this food pantry, this program that you want to do to their outcomes? When we're looking, and I know I touched on this, but I want to repeat it again because I can't stress this enough. When we are collaborating, this is stakeholder mapping. So I could do literally a half a day with an organization just on stakeholder mapping. And so when we think about stakeholders, that's anyone that can influence the work that we're doing. And you have to think of it as human and non-human. So anyone in Chicago, weather, I've flown in and out of Chicago many times, I get stuck there, right? So we know that weather can play a role that's non-human. Winter, all that stuff. COVID. And then there you have stakeholders who are going to have a high influence. COVID had a high influence. It had a really low interest level, right? It didn't care about hunger. But think about who has a high influence and a high interest. Who has a high influence and a low interest? And those two, we can talk about the other ones, but I think that would get too deep in stakeholder mapping. I think what tends to happen, or at least what I've seen with the people who we've consulted with, many people will spend a lot of time working and trying to get on the good graces or get the attention or increase the interest level of partner A. We will work with partner A. We will try to convince them because we know they have a high influence and we want them to have a high interest, but we're never going to win them over. The way you win them over is when you work with the people that you overlook because it's easy. Those are your high influence, high interest. They're easy. You already have them. They're on your list. They're on your boat. They're rowing the boat with you, right? Like they're with you. But if we can really hone in on those stakeholders and make them stronger and better, partner A will start looking over and be like, huh, what's happening? They might have an interest in that, right? They might start wanting to move over to that high influence, high interest. That's how you're going to get partner A. So how do we really focus on partner B? And if we're constantly focusing on partner A, I just described this for myself. My daughter, she's 14. Guess what we have? Hamsters. 2. I look at those hamsters and I was like, that's me. That's me with partner A. That's me trying to convince the high influence, low interest for over 10 years, spinning and spinning and spinning and spinning. And when I finally said, I can't do this, and I started focusing on partner B, the high influence, high interest, guess what happened? All these other opportunities started coming because I wasn't putting all my energy that I was using. So when we think about who our partners are, it's really important that we understand their interest level and be honest with ourselves with that. I was so caught up in my ego and spinning around, wanting to prove my worth and prove our program. It just wasn't working. So let's talk about food sourcing, probably one of the most important things, right? Like we have to have food to feed people. And so we have the obvious, which would be your Feeding America food banks. Many people, believe it or not, do not understand that there's independent food banks out there. And we have Midwest Food Bank in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. I'm curious where your Midwest, because Midwest Food Bank is from Midwest. So somewhere out there, I'm not sure, but you can Google it, find your Midwest food banks. I love them. They have no government food. There's nothing wrong with the whole government food, but you don't have government forms. They are mostly corporate donations and private donations. And so the food that they have are going to be name brands that your students will recognize. And they will get, oh, I see, you have one. Yay. All right, you have it in Bloomington. I don't know where Bloomington is, but you might have more. It's worth the partnership. Ours is 2 hours away. And we have been able to secure in Central Illinois, we have been able to secure other nonprofits who need their help. And so now twice a month, they're sending a tractor trailer up and they're dropping off at one of our community partners. So this is another way we leveraged community collaboration. So now all of our partners will go pick up when the truck comes. And so now we're multi-sourcing. Many times people think that they just have to work with one food bank. You don't have to. I look at it this way, like restaurants can source their food from multiple purveyors. Why can't a food pantry or a food access point do that? And so many of our partners work with our local Feeding America food bank, and they also work with our Midwest, our independent food bank that's 2 hours south. We do have other ones, and they're not in our area, again, 2 hours away, but this is the one that we've been able to really secure. Anyone can drive to these other ones, but that's a big resource, right? If we can get these tractor trailers up to us, it's even better. Farmers, we talked about local farmers. This is our farmer, Liz. She sends me pictures like this every week, and she says, I'm harvesting kale. It's not always kale. In this picture, it's kale, especially in the spring in Pennsylvania. She's like, I'm harvesting lettuce for tomorrow. And she's harvesting food to fight hunger. Let's just take a minute to think about that, because usually in a food banking system, it's end of life produce, and it's probably been in 3, 4, 5 different warehouses, and it's gone. It's come all the way from Mexico or California. This is our farmer in our backyard. If you have not heard about Swipe Out Hunger, we're going to have more information on some of these resources. Swipe Out Hunger is amazing. Swipe Out Hunger is one of those, they can share cards, right? Like, you know how you have your POS system for food service. Swipe Out Hunger works where students can share their points with other students. I think they have other resources. We did interview Jamie. She's their new executive director. And I think she ran the Iowa Food Bank prior to doing that. There's also the One Stop program. I would look into that. That's really where a student can go and get multiple services that they might need. And I'm sure you're all aware of the Hunger Free initiative for colleges. And then certainly Food is Medicine programming. Again, it's just a hot topic. Any questions or ideas that you want to share for food sourcing, especially if you're running? I mean, obviously food sourcing could be, I should have put this on here, your food rescue programs. So I would look up food rescue and put your zip code in or your area code. Out in Pittsburgh, we have something called 412 Rescue, 412 Food Rescue. They were kind of the leaders and I don't want to say they're the first, but they're definitely the pioneers, to the point that many states are adapting that zip code, or not the zip code. Oh my goodness, the area code. So for us, we're 570. There's a 570 Food Rescue. So you might want to look at that. They would be really good partners. Another good partner is, this is where a student project could come in, especially if there's any trucking programs that you might have, CDL programs. They can help you partner with the logistics people. So when you have a tractor trailer that is going to a big box store, and that big box store refuses a pallet of macaroni and cheese because 2 of the 50 cases have been destroyed, only 2 out of 50 cases destroyed, they will say, sorry, we're not going to accept that. The driver has 2 options, and usually the first option happens. They pay a landfill fee and they just go and dump that. Or they can have a second option, and they can have a tax write-off if you're a nonprofit, or you can maybe partner. This might be where community collaboration comes in, where you might have to work with an organization that is a nonprofit. They could have a tax write-off, and they could bring that macaroni and cheese, a pallet of it, to you. When I was running a food pantry in Kingston, Owl Beach West Side Food Pantry, every Wednesday, the CDL driver knew, or the logistics person knew, that we were serving food and that we would take a truck. And so it was like every week we got a surprise truck. Most of the time it was Barilla pasta. I don't know why it was Barilla pasta, but there were days we would get 3 pallets delivered to us. We did have a garage that we could store it in, but most of it was gone pretty fast. So that could be something that a student, especially if you have a trucking or a warehousing or some type of training, having them take the lead and doing that logistics, coordinating. And they can even partner with your community partner and say, hey, we just got a pallet of Barilla pasta. We can't take it all. Why don't you take half? Right. And then you could help other nonprofits source. So food rescue, again, the CDL logistics, big time. What else? Your corporate donations, certainly. If you're working with your local grocery store, or if you had any type of, like, we have Mrs. T's pierogies. I've worked with them. We have Hanover Foods, and it's like canned food. I've worked with them. So are there any food warehousing companies in your area that you can partner with? I would look into that too. Okay, so we are coming towards the end. I was hoping that we would have more dialogue, so I hope that we can talk more about this. But for our resources, food dignity resources, you could do the challenge. Again, that's free. You have the Institute, you have a toolkit that has engaging conversation starters. You have the questionnaire bank. There's a lot of things that is free to you that you can use, but you can also, at our next call, you can come in, bring a potential community partner or someone you're already working with. It doesn't have to be new, or it could be another professor or a student group. Think about who you might want to work with. And you can ask questions on what's working and what's not working, or suggestions. We can brainstorm. So that meeting is June 21st, and it's really going to be led by your questions. So you need to come to that with questions and partners. We will, it's about 99% done. I was hoping to get more information through dialogue with you, but you will be getting a strategic roadmap. I'm calling it a roadmap. It's not going to be a map, but it's going to be an outline of different things that we talked about today, probably going deeper, maybe some other things that we did not talk about on that. So you can use it as a resource. You can, so it'll be organized by grant writing, strategic communication, sustainability, workforce development, all of those things. So it should be easy to follow, easy to read. So with that is all I have. So I would really love to open this up to any questions or dialogue. And if you want, I can pull up what we have working on that roadmap, if anyone wants me to do that and kind of go over it a little bit. You tell me.
If anybody does have questions, everybody has the opportunity to unmute. So feel free to unmute yourself and ask questions, or if you'd like to post those in the chat, feel free to post those in the chat.
Oh, I see that one. Locations near inside tutoring labs work well here. That's a really great location. Yeah, when we worked with our career and technology, we asked the students where should the locations be. When we were at another university, we did our location right in the Union Hall where students were eating. But again, we didn't talk about hunger. We didn't say we're fighting hunger. We talked about environmental sustainability because that's a hot topic for them. And we had a line. It wasn't embarrassing, or at least to the best of my knowledge, we had a long line. So everyone was engaged. And we actually set that up during lunch hours when it would be the busiest time of day.
And then Clancy, do you want to talk about part 3 on the 21st and what that will include?
Yeah. So, part 3 is I'm not going to have a presentation. So part 3 is really for you to come to this place, this container, with your questions. But what I would really like is what I'm hoping that you got from this are some ideas on who you could collaborate with. Maybe they're new, maybe you want to strengthen existing collaboration. So, what does that look like? And you can bring them here if I don't know how much of a demand we're going to have. If it seems like it may, I'm wondering, Julie, I don't know if we should have people. Do you want people to sign up so they know like they have 10 minutes, they have 15 minutes, and it's like really a hot seat? Or we can do it. I'm open to suggestions, or we can do it where people show up and they just ask questions. But what I would like to see is you to take advantage of an opportunity to have a hot seat.
Yeah.
Time to ask questions and brainstorm what's working or what's not working.
So
So,
right now we have it set up as they do register, and I'll post that in the chat.
okay.
But yeah, if people want to, those of you who are on today, if you want to plan for a time, you can let us know, or just come and we'll get through the questions as we go. But I'm going to post that in the chat here. So that is where you can find information on all those. That is also where the recording will be posted after we are done today. And then I'm going to share my screen, if you don't mind, Clancy.
Not at all.
Go ahead and open. And so this is the website. So under professional development, if you look at the learning renewal website itself, has all this great stuff on here. And then if you go to professional development, that's where you'll find the food and dignity webinar series. And there's the recording from our May 10th engagement. And then here's number 2. And we'll do that. That recording will be posted. Give us about 72 hours is usually what we ask for. And then June 21st. So that's a follow-up with questions and answers and all of that great stuff. So any other additional information that you want to ask or bring forward, please do so.